I'm at the Embers, shivering. The sound of my 3-year-old daughter's screams are in my mind. I'm Adam Roxby. This is the Embers Podcast, an occasional show where I share my provocative thoughts and interesting conversations. On this cold night, let me start at the beginning. When I was a student nurse, I was concerned about the willingness of some parents to succumb to the scaremongering of charlatans who bore misinformation and frank nonsense about vaccinations. While thankfully this was quickly debunked by science, the infection of fear had already begun to spread. Parents wanting to do the best thing for their children were duped by the lies and had started to abstain from giving their children these life-saving vaccinations. Obviously, the inevitable happened. Illnesses we thought we had consigned to history began making a reappearance. At this time, all those years ago, I was scathing and quite indiscriminate. I felt anger at the champions of this rubbish, but also the people who would risk us all by not listening to the professionals and allowing their children to potentially suffer the ravages of these maladies we had so proudly conquered. But that was before I had children of my own. Now I find myself in a GP surgery in Essex in 2020 with my bright-eyed daughter happily playing on her iPad, holding my hand as we walk to the nurse's room where she's to have her MMR booster, MMR being the measles, mumps and rubella vaccination. I had experienced the churning guilt of my daughter's cry before. When she was a baby, a vaccination was sunk into her chubby thigh. The screams were short-lived and she slept, and then forgot, with only a circular plaster as a reminder. I thought I'd have the same pragmatic approach to this vaccination, but of course things had changed. No longer was she so utterly dependent, and this needy little baby who was at my will, but she was an individual. A person who expressed likes and dislikes, who would spontaneously clutch me and tell me she loved me. A person who would try and describe her day and the friends she had played with. A person who would run out of the bathroom and shout so proudly to all around that she'd done a wee-wee. For the first time I understood the pain those parents had experienced those years ago. I didn't want to cause my little beast any pain or discomfort. I didn't want her to look at me with those beautiful blue eyes and wonder why I'd let this person hurt her. I realised in that moment, as I hugged my daughter, bracing myself for what was about to come, that those parents weren't the enemy. They were the victims. These natural instincts that you have to protect and nurture had been perverted and exploited by the real villains in this story. They had been given the hope to believe that by saving their child from the mild pain of a vaccination, that they were actually doing the right thing. Who wouldn't want to be seduced by such a fantasy? I wished for it to be true, as I saw the nurse drawing up the injection, but I knew it wasn't. I knew this was the right thing to do. I wasn't going to let the charlatans win. I wasn't going to risk my family and community. So it was that the needle went into her arm, and the screams rang out. I held her tight to stop her attempts to escape, and the nurse deftly administered the second injection, and it was done. It was now my job to comfort my sobbing daughter as I carried her away. Knowing that I had done the right thing bore small comfort in that moment, but before the day was out, all was forgotten, all was forgiven. She was playing with her friends who had all endured the same experience. She snuggled with me on the sofa and squeezed me with the same love and affection that I so craved, and that night she slept as peacefully as ever. Being a parent means your sole responsibility is to make decisions in the best interest of your family and to those close to you. There was no question that what I did was the right choice, but this experience has changed the way I will combat the scourge of scientific mistrust. We mustn't shame the parents who are the victims. We must understand the struggle they face and bring them back into the fold. As advocates of reality and rationality, we mustn't waste our energy on the hardcore, the devout, the so-called anti-vaxxers. They are, ironically, immune from rational discourse. The more fervent and compelling the evidence and the argument in opposition to their position, the more they will be entrenched and convinced that they have the truth. No, we must dedicate our energy on the masses, use our time on those who are seeking the answers rather than being convinced that they already have them. We must not underestimate the threat of a populace who abandons science. The problems we face require our vigilance, and while it was hard to hear the cries of my daughter, she is now protected from a range of horrific illnesses and can play with her friends without the risk of putting them in harm's way. I feel better having shared that. So, thank you for listening. You can find my other thoughts and hear a great conversation with the vegan athlete, Plant-Based Ben, over on the website to this podcast, www.theemberspodcast.com. I look forward to seeing you here at my digital bonfire next time.